Hello, everyone. We are back with a new nuvotalks episode. Today's episode, we have with us Guille, Kevin, and Pere. Guys, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your Salesforce journey being an architect?
Of course. Well, I'm Guille. I'm a Salesforce Architect at Nuvolar. Thanks for having me in the podcast. I've been in software, I think, already 11 years. At the beginning, it was 2 years working with IBM and Java technologies. And then I switched instantly to Salesforce as a developer. Started super early with Lightning. It was the beginning of Lightning components, not the web components, the normal ones. And I started in consulting too, working with a lot of clients. And one of the clients that I worked through another company, it was Salesforce itself. So I have experience too. Being there and also being in their offices, working a little bit with them. Really cool experience. And yeah, now I'm here.
I'm Pere. I'm the CTO of Nuvolar. But I am also a Salesforce architect. And that is because my journey of 13 years has been a journey that started and is still ongoing on the Salesforce platform. I started as a simple intern doing some tests on the platform, understanding what is Salesforce, because I was out of the university. I was like, ring the bell, but didn't really know about it. And I learned a lot about the Salesforce platform before it became a really platform to develop applications, moving from an intern to a developer, then a team lead. And after that, we kind of started the division of Nuvolar that focuses on consulting. During that period in the consulting division, I became a Salesforce architect. And now I'm both an architect and the CTO of the company.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a technical architect. I've been an architect for 2.5 years here at Nuvolar. And I started as a developer and a consultant. I've always been a hybrid profile in both companies where I started my career and now here at Nuvolar. And yeah, I just transitioned. I've been the last one to transition to this role from the team.
Grab your headphones and turn off your laptop and let's jump in.
Welcome to Nuvotalks, the podcast to power up your business with Salesforce.
In today's episode, we'll be talking about Salesforce architecture, limits, apex, design patterns with our Salesforce architects in Nuvolar. What skills do you need to become a Salesforce architect? What helped you to become a good Salesforce architect? Can you tell me?
I can start on this one if you want. Well, I could say fake it till you make it, but that would not be true. So I think one of the most important things that you will need if you want to go in this direction is the willingness. And what does this mean? No? For us, when we look at somebody that is doing a career progression, sometimes it's more important to see the willingness to grow, the willingness to be a little bit, give this extra mile than the initial set of skills that you have. And this is something that you will notice with the people that wants to take the most difficult task, that wants to take the task that nobody in the team wants to do because it's maybe the most boring or the one that will take them the more time. So if you are this kind of person, you are already in the path to becoming a Salesforce architect. It is true that you will need a foundation of knowledge and you will need all of the effort that this requires in order to gain it, but with this first willingness, you will gain that. And another, let's say, advice or another point that I find that this has been very useful for me was mentoring. So as you have gained this foundation of knowledge, as you have taken these difficult tasks, then it's time to give it to the rest of the team. Take all of the chances to explain to your colleagues, the rest of the company, all of the things that you're doing, all of these tasks that maybe it's difficult and you have gained that knowledge. So sharing all of this knowledge will make you a little bit better because it is the best way to learn is to actually teach it to somebody else. I don't know, guys. Any other thing?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And also, I feel that from the start, there was like a sheer curiosity for understanding how things work. And that could be one of the drivers, I think, to be an architect in software in general, right? Just to understand how to place things together. In a way, I feel like even a developer in the lower level is also an architect. Is building the architecture as a more lower level, but then you just step back and see things from a little bit behind, abstract yourself more, and start mixing all these systems together. And there's something about understanding how everything works, the idea of trying to structure everything, put everything together, that I think drives you to wanting to get into that kind of position or role in a company.
Okay. So if I understand well, apart from the technical skills, because you guys need to have good technical skills as well, you need to be good at mentoring, you need to be good at, I guess, documenting as well. You need to have good communication skills because the end you are dealing with clients, right?
Yes. And documenting is a way of communication. It's just you are communicating asynchronously, but essentially documenting is getting all of this knowledge that you have acquired during your task and putting it on paper for you or for somebody else to later review. So these soft skills are also important. Maybe we're focusing too much on the soft skills and the willingness. It is true that you need a foundation, but sometimes it comes as a granted that is like everybody knows that you need this foundation, but you need all these other let's say soft skills in order to become a good architect. Yeah.
Foundations. What certifications do you recommend or do you need to be a Salesforce architect? Where would you start? Apart from having the developer one, imagine, I guess we all have the developer one. What would be the next step?
Well, I think that one of the easiest architect certifications to start with is the sharing and visibility. It's, I think, core to understand the security mechanisms available in the platform. And it's also a natural progression certification when you start in a technical position as a developer, if you want to transition to an architect position. Recently, I did the development and application lifecycle, and it was very interesting as well because it's part of the responsibility of an architect to think of the whole release process, and that gives you a very solid foundation on the whole life cycle of the development. And I think also the integration one. It's very important to understand the different integration patterns because you will always face a project where you have to build an integration, and it's essential to understand the different patterns and tools and technologies available.
Totally. I have another one that is not part of, let's say, the pyramid of being a technical architect or solution architect within Salesforce, but I think it's pretty useful. There is a developer too. It does a deep dive into Salesforce in general as a developer, but still it's quite long. You have to do all this trailhead, all these badges before even taking the exam. But it's pretty thorough in your knowledge about Salesforce, and it's pretty hands-on. So I really like that one. I think it's important for any developer that wants to go to more senior level and architects within Salesforce.
And it is challenging. It is quite challenging. I would say it's even more difficult than some of the architect ones.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
One I would add, just to also complement, sometimes in the Salesforce world, we are in the Salesforce world, no? But as you grow as an architect, you will need to expand beyond the Salesforce world. And it is normal that you will need to interact with other systems, and you'll need to understand other technologies, that things like AWS, things like Google Cloud Platform, Azure, all of this is going to come into your ecosystem. And if you have grown on the Salesforce world, that can be challenging. A good first step into the external ecosystem is Heroku. And the Heroku certification can help you in that point. But essentially, as a development platform, Heroku has a lot of the things that you will end up encountering in the other clouds. So it's a good first step in order to broaden your architecture.
Yeah, it's more agnostic, like as opposed to Salesforce that is really focused on one technology, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And this is the point. No, you will, as you broaden your horizons, you want to be technology agnostic. You will still always be a Salesforce architect, but you will want to connect with different systems and know them better. So a good first step, I think, because of it's part of Salesforce, Heroku, no? So, but it has a good connection. So I would start there and then move on to other platforms.
Good. What are the main, most difficult challenges that you had being a Salesforce architect? Or if you could give yourself an advice, you're just starting with this role, what would that be?
An advice I would give a lot of advice. Now, one thing that is difficult, especially if your prior position is developer, or you are on the day-to-day of the team, no? And you're getting tasks and you need to code, you need to deliver, and suddenly today you are a Salesforce architect. It is very difficult to go from your day-to-day tasks to actually doing architectural tasks. And your mindset is still stuck in, I need to take the most difficult task, what I was saying before, no, the tricky ones. I will take the most difficult, do it for the team, and then I also need to do the architecture work. But you will, if you do this, I did this mistake, you will realize that you don't have enough time in your day to do everything, which is normal. So you need to make sure that at least 50% of your time is for helping your colleagues, is for doing all the things that an architect should do, is for going and mentoring, ensuring the documentation is up to date, doing the code reviews, and I don't know, other things like that. But if I were to give one advice to me, it's like, hey, stop doing the difficult tasks, let the others enjoy the pleasure of doing the difficult tasks. Now you are kind of a guide, a mentor, somebody that unblocks them, but not so much the doer.
I would say that to me, a good piece of advice would have been to be told that at the end, you learn from the challenge, so don't be scared of complexity. Most likely, if you've reached that position, is a natural evolution in your career path, and there are many ways to solve a problem and to address a challenge and many solutions. But at the end, it's putting together all your knowledge about different disciplines, technologies, and your soft skills to communicate properly the available options and come up with a solution. But you always learn, and even you need to be comfortable in this complexity, because at the end it's the best way to learn, and the next time you will provide an even better solution.
I think one piece of advice that I would have given myself in the past is read everything related to Salesforce limits before starting, because I learned about limits by just facing them, and some of them, they will like really, after everything was on prod, and sometimes there's some particular limits that were challenging. And I think, I just learned in the field and just in the middle of the battle, where I should have just read them all and fully memorized them and have it always in mind. I think, that was something that would have changed in my path.
Let me be devil's advocate, but I think if you try to do that,
it wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work.
You need to experience it.
You need to experience the pain.
And say, now I have to change everything because of this.
Yeah. Because the first time that you've done this deployment to production, you're so proud, and suddenly 1,000 users are using that, and you're hitting CPU time or too many queries, and it's like, damn it, you're gonna remember that one forever.
Or even the asynchronous Apex one, it's like, okay, that's hitting those limits are quite challenging.
And I don't know, sorry, I'm taking over.
No, go ahead.
But I don't know if it happened to you guys, but before starting as a developer in Salesforce, I was developing in other technologies that they did not have these limits. Or let's say that if you develop in Java or if you develop in Python, and especially if your application is in the cloud, your limit is your credit card, Essentially the how much you're going to have to pay at the end of the month for the computation that you spend. I mean, you can hit the memory limits, but in general, I would say you don't have these kind of limitations, and it was complete mentality shift from one way of coding to another to move to the platform. But as you said, hit it once and you remember forever.
How do you explain this to the clients? Okay, there's a limit. And what if they don't like it? How do you deal with difficult clients?
Yeah, it's important to mention the trade-off. Like, you cannot just focus on the technical solution, but on the pain points. So you need to always be very aware of what you're trying to solve for the client. But you cannot just provide a solution which is the optimal in terms of the best technical solution.
Kevin, are you telling me that we cannot provide always the best technical solution to the client?
Sorry, Pere.
What if I'm not what if I'm not a technical person? How would you explain that to me?
Well, that's the challenge. You need to be very empathetic with the client. You need to understand. You need to use their vocabulary. You need to adapt to the client. You need to be very adaptable. And once you know the client and you build that trust, it's kind of easier to explain, I'm doing this for the best interest of the company, of the project. I want this to be successful as much as you. And there are some things I'm considering that I want to, take into consideration in the final decision. I will never just define a final definite solution. I will always try to put on the table and explain the different alternatives. And it needs to be a conversation around them. And there will be trade-offs. I just want them, the client to understand, the team to understand what are the benefits and pros of every alternative. And then we together make a decision. And then it feels more like a negotiation and a discussion, and everyone has something to say about the final decision.
Yeah, I think that's where the soft skills play a role, especially when you have non-technical clients and they are focused on the business and what the features of the app. The technical part that is in the background, they don't understand, and they understand that long-term might help. So having that conversation sometimes is tough. I will say that usually the clients that are hitting limits, they're usually bigger companies because they have more users or more things going on, and they tend to have a technical person on the other side, almost, like a stakeholder is also technical. So it makes the conversation a little bit easier on that sense, but still always a challenge. It's always short-term versus long-term, right? They want the feature, they want the thing that makes things work. And you're talking, okay, but this in the long term might have some issues. It might be sometimes complex to explain to the final user or the client itself. And I think that's when all the soft skills that we talk about play a big role.
And the points that you guys mentioned in the end boil down to having the trust of the clients. If you have explained well, if you have had an honest and good communication, at the end you will have the trust of the client. And I think this is something we do very well at Nuvolar. We, because of our good track record, because of all our good architects, our good consultants, the job well done of the team, we have gained the trust of the client. And suddenly these conversations, instead of being something that you dread, it's like, oh my God, it's much easier because you have gained the trust of the client. So it's not something that is the responsibility of the architect. It starts from the salesperson that doesn't overpromise. It continues to the team that stays together, keeps constant communication, constant feedback. And then when a difficult time comes and we need to say, look, what you want to do, it's not feasible. We can have these other options. Then they trust you and it's a bit easier. So it's kind of a work of the whole team.
It all comes down to teamwork, right? The end. Yeah. Good. Any stories you can remember of difficult clients? I know I'm asking this, but they are the funny stories and they are the challenging ones. So if you can think of anything that you can share with us today.
Sure. I can start. Then
you have one, good.
I have
you have
one.
Plenty or one?
I have plenty, but I'll explain why it was very. I don't know if it's very funny, but so in Nuvolar we have become known because of our expertise, and one of the things that we have become known is the ability to fix any kind of the situation that we encounter. And so many times some of our clients came from a previous Salesforce implementation that was not working well and so on. And there was one client where they had done a Sales Cloud implementation, everything in a single object. So the opportunity object has the whole data model for absolutely everything. It had contact, it had account fields, it had all of the products, have everything in one giant 300 list of fields. And for me, when I saw this, my head exploded. Essentially, I was like, who the hell how can you do this if Salesforce already gives you everything that you have done? It's already done. You don't need to do it and put everything in the opportunity. So,
how did you explain that to the client? How did you fix that?
Well, first I took a deep breath.
For sure.
Relax. I called the rest of my team to enjoy the crazy situation. I needed to share it. But in the end, we had to redo it. There was no quick fix for such a mess. We had to go and do the whole implementation process again, and essentially gather the requirements, create the new data model, create all of the new sharing model that would require, etc., and perform it gradually. Unfortunately, we had to do a migration in production, so we had to do that in the weekend to avoid service disruption. But we managed. Now they are happy with the new normal Sales Cloud implementation.
They're happy clients. Good.
I don't know if it's super funny, but I have one that at least it was surprising for me. It's a company from Latin America, this client, and they were pretty new. It seems that the initial provider didn't explain a lot to them regarding Salesforce, and they didn't know how to translate the org to Spanish. So when I saw the org, they created new objects that were the replica of the standard objects, but in Spanish. So they have cuenta and account, and the standard oportunidad and opportunity.
Two different objects.
So basically, they rebuilt everything. And it seems that probably was the provider that did that or somebody, because I don't think that they will do it custom. But yeah, and it was hard for me to explain, okay, now you have everything duplicated. If you change it to Spanish, it's there. But it's better. And also they were asking me why would we change it back to the standard. So I just explained what's better from the standard objects as opposed to this custom. All the things that already are pre-made and pre-built for those objects. But yeah, it was funny that the first time that I saw something like that.
I wonder, how was it documented? Let's go to the documentation part, because that's really important as well. How do we document our clients' org? How was it documented? Was there any documentation for this? No,
for that one there was some.
I've struggled with that a lot. I've been in a project where I had to build I did like reverse engineering just to have some documentation to use as a guideline to understand the current processes, especially record triggered processes, automations, which can mess up with any new feature. You are building something. You are doing some database operations, updating or inserting records as part of the new functionality, and suddenly the system behaves in a way that nobody can explain, not even the business. You just, you are new, you're the last person to join the project, but you're going to do this documentation work, otherwise you cannot progress. And you need to address first the documentation to really have a view. Generally, I build diagrams to explain to myself, but also to the client, this is what's happening when you do this kind of database operation. So when we're introducing this new functionality, this can happen, and you need to introduce changes, perhaps refactors.
How does a good documentation look like?
Just before that, you remember before I was saying architect skills and so on, and we mentioned difficult tasks that nobody would want to take on the team that will bring you to the architect path. That is one of those. For the ones that are listening and they want to go on the architect path, at least once you will have to do reverse engineering on some place that there is no documentation, and you will need to navigate those waters, and it will be a pain. But once you have gone through that, suddenly your knowledge has leveled up a lot. So
it's horrible, especially when there's no documentation. You have to do reverse engineering. And the business side, I'm not sure of what's going on in the org either. So you're basically just delving into that, trying to understand what it might be doing. But yeah, stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So how does a good documentation look like? What elements do we have to include in a good documentation?
For me, the good documentation has to be something that people will read, because there's a lot of documentation that nobody reads. And for me, it's charts, always charts and visual elements. When there's too much text and big paragraph, it might say something super important, nobody's going to read it. So then lose a chart, whatever, any tool, but just put a lot of charts, visual things, images. That's what also will stick in your mind when you read the documentation. So that for me is like cornerstone in any type of document you're building.
To me, charts, diagrams are very important for processes like businesses, and most of the conversations for record triggered automations, integrations, batch processes, most likely everything can be translated into a process. And you can use the notation that you prefer, UPN or a flowchart. But having a visual representation of all the steps that the new functionality will follow, and maybe when there is human intervention necessary, who is responsible, adding all these details into a visual chart, you have more chances of the business really understanding the approach. And it's very important, not just answering what kind of documentation, but when documentation is necessary. Sometimes people just create documentation at the end of the project to explain what has been built, but I think it's more valuable to have the documentation beforehand, so you can really iterate over that and reach an agreement before starting the actual development work, and you have already presented an idea of the final solution, which obviously can then be iterated and developed further. And the final documentation can change from the initial one, but it's important to start documenting first before developing, and then during the development process, and at the end, updating always all your enhancements to existing functionality in the corresponding document.
Okay. So what we can say, the visual document is the best document that you can provide to your client.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to the rest of your colleagues. I would add a little twist. I fully agree with what you said, but just a little twist. I would be very consistent in the documentation, because that will help your clients and that will help your team. If you use one specific tool, always use that tool for diagrams. If you use a specific format, always use that format, because then you can create templates. Then everybody knows how to do it. So if you have, as an architect, you will see architectural diagrams with so many different types of tools and formats, and it ends up being confusing. So if you can be consistent, that's good. Luckily, Salesforce gives you a way to be consistent. If you have followed a well-architected Salesforce website, you will see that they have a specific set of diagrams and a specific set of pieces that they use to build those diagrams on Lucidchart. You can download them, and I hugely recommend to use those for your documentation, because it will be first consistent internally, but it will also be consistent with Salesforce documentation, making it everybody that is coming from outside the company much easier to understand, because it will be the same diagrams that they have seen on other, let's say, a standard Salesforce documentation.
And how would you deal if you work with different architects in the same project and they don't follow, or they don't want to use the same tool as you? How would you deal with that?
It's a nice battle to that.
That doesn't happen here in Nuvolar.
Usually it's one architect per project, right? Also,
Usually, but you've been part of projects where you had to work with an external architect or with a company that has their own architect, and you will have to sort of work together, understand each other. Well, how do you organize your work in this case?
I would say two things. One is, of course, you will try to convince them. And the best way is to tell them, hey, we are using the Salesforce standard. Because in Salesforce, the architects, we like standard stuff. So we love it. If we can use standard, we go standard.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to use standard.
So let's that is a very powerful argument, and I think in general that will convince 90%. But another trick is something that Kevin said before. Like, the job of the architect is to bring things before they go to before they are being in the development phase. So you want to discuss it with your team. You want to put an initial architectural documentation. So if you do it before them, that it is likely that you might do this documentation later, you've already established the standard, and suddenly it's a bit easier. But sometimes you lose the battle, and you lose the battle, and then there is nothing to do. But I would say these are two tricks that you can try to use.
And when do you start documenting? When you become an architect? Or do you start documenting already when you're a developer? I
started before, and it was helpful because you're already getting involved in design thinking through documentation, drafting, especially data modeling. My first diagrams were for data modeling. It was very helpful. I think there's no good way to do a data model proposal with just Excels. You need to draw the relationships, an entity relationship diagram. It's what it's called. Then processes. Generally, people, and I've seen this done by consultants, developers, but using any kind of process notation diagram helps anyone understand better what the client is trying to explain you, which is the to-be process to be automated. So it's. I think everyone starts diagramming before they become. They progress in their career towards becoming an architect. Any good tools you can recommend for Lucidchart? Anything else?
Yeah, I think Lucidchart.
I mean, a free version, it's
draw. Sometimes if you want to share it with the customer and they don't have a Lucidchart license, you can just draw.io.
Draw.io. Okay.
In general, these are the two ones we've used the most, Draw.io and Lucidchart. To your previous point, and going back to what Guille said before, it is everybody is a little architect. So it's not it's always a team effort. The architect will maybe make the final calls, give a guidelines and so on. But in the end, even if you are a consultant or even if you are a developer on your first day on the job, they will give you a task and you need to pick up the pieces that you know about and build a solution. So since this is already being an architect, and the next step that your team needs to tell you is, well, you should document it. So it is always a responsibility, not the architect. It's always a responsibility of the whole team. And the more you share it, the more your team will learn, and the more you share it, the better end result you'll have.
Yeah, it's like almost like a mamushka thing, right? Where everybody is part of the design process, and depending on the project, but if it's a large project, you're going to be the high-level architect, but within that, you're not going to design every step of the process, every Apex class, whatever.
Impossible.
Then there's a design for those, and that also should be documented in a way. So you're explaining more like high-level solutioning of the thing, but then everybody's playing the architect role on a lower level.
Conclusion, everything should be documented, and we should use visual tools for it. Good. Let's talk a little bit about customized or very much customized or misconfigured orgs. We've been talking,
like
we've been having a few examples of badly managed orgs, but what happens when they are misconfigured? How would you first start the investigation? How would you understand an org? What would you do when you get a new client who has already a Salesforce org? They have issues, but you need to understand what is happening there. What would be your first step?
Well, we just have talked about it. Let's look at the documentation.
There is no documentation.
As you have just pointed, and that has been mentioned here several times, sometimes there is no documentation. So then it's time for Kevin doing the reverse engineering.
Or a health check. There are tools that help you to run health checks.
How do you do a health check?
Well, you can run an analysis with one of the available tools to check which objects are being used, which fields, what's close to the limits of the org, to understand really data model and usage, and you already can identify pain points, maybe being closer to the roll-ups, and maybe that explains why they have created a custom object to, and custom automations to do custom aggregations into what otherwise would be a standard roll-up field. So you start analyzing I would say, and first of all, speak the vocabulary of the company, because sometimes you have an object name something and then the company uses another term. So you need to kind of build that knowledge base. So it's very useful for me to have a vocabulary table explaining this by the business means that, but the entity living in Salesforce, really it's 3 entities related to each other. So you try to speak the same vocabulary. Once you have that, you could go deeper and start doing reverse engineering and building the documentation and take it from there. Okay. Generally, it's more like something that doesn't happen as a project, but the business wants you to deliver value. The business wants you to already build on top of what exists. So you do this analysis and you build over time all this documentation and knowledge, but you always think of the future person taking over that, the maintenance or enhancements of that org, and you want to make things easier for them. So it's not something that you want to keep in your head. You want to keep it in a document written format.
Makes sense. And the health check is the first step of your reverse engineering. It's like your initial point where you get your foundation, you build the semantic knowledge. That definitely makes total sense. You
can do also an Apex scan, like the PMD tool or some of that, to kind of understand some of the
static code analysis.
Yeah, static code analysis maybe. Also, it will give you some ideas of where to start, what could be the priority if you want to do, let's say, almost not a full refactor, but just improve some of the things on the more technical level on the org. Seeing if there's too many outdated stuff, like process builder, process workflow rules, that sometimes could be one of the first things to move.
Clutter, that things we've seen many times when we arrive to a new org. what I call clutter, things that are not used anymore. Because in Salesforce, it's very easy to deploy, but it's not so easy to remove. So things keep accumulating, and suddenly you have a lot of things that they're not used anymore, and nobody knows why they are there. It's just generating confusion.
Right.
So this is one of the typical things that you will find on an org is things that you might want to remove, so as to make life easier for future team, the future architects that come later.
That made me think that it's very important to understand the ownership. You know, like sometimes there are several lines of business using the same org, you know, and you need to build that knowledge as well of who owns which of the metadata, which of the components built or applications built on the platform, and who will have the ownership to make a decision whether that can be removed or not. Because sometimes you're just blocked because the health check might tell you this is not used, but you cannot find the person. You know, you might ask somebody in the business, is this something we can delete? And the answer might be, I'm not sure, because this is, maybe we don't use it, but this team uses it. So you need to sometimes build that network, those connections. So at some point, you know all the right stakeholders to make decisions and progress on this kind of technical depth actions to others.
And I think going back to the question about excessive customization or let's say misused orgs, I think sometimes there are companies that adapt more to what Salesforce has to provide as a standard way, and some are companies that want Salesforce to adapt this platform to adapt to their needs, and sometimes they go really further into that. And for me, the customization that I hate sometimes that I see is like there's something that they didn't like about the standard layout of an object. Let's say the kind of object, they want to change something that's different, and they rebuild the entire layout using lightweight components or something fully customized, every field, everything again, and which is super hard to maintain. And also, you lose any new release that Salesforce might be doing in one of these fields. You lose those capabilities and technologies.
The extreme example is what you explained before. I don't like that the account is in English, so I'm going to translate the whole. But it is the most common thing that you will find. Over customization, not using the standard, because it can be because what you said, Guille, that because the company wants to change, but sometimes it's just that the partner that they chose decided to go on this route for whatever reason that might not make sense to us, and we'd always try to bring our clients to the standard.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to say no, basically. When you're a Salesforce architect, you have to talk to your client and say no. How difficult is that? Do you have stories where even you presented one or two solutions, but they still wanted to go with the one they have decided in their mind?
I do have one story, and it's a little bit funny because it was in the what I used to call the community. Now it's Experience Cloud. Chatter is already embedded there, and you have a feed, and you can come and tag people, add emojis, whatever on that thing. Salesforce already provides like a palette of emojis. It's the standard one, but it's not exactly the same one that you might find in other apps. They're missing emojis. And
which emoji was missing?
I don't remember which one, but this customer was complaining. There was some emojis that weren't there. And this person wanted to have every emoji, but it's like, we cannot do it. We have to make everything custom, which is, first of all, it's massive what you have to mimic. And just for a few emojis, she ended up not doing it. But it was a whole conversation. It was frustrating because that particular capability that was missing there, just that there was not too many.
For the next episode, you have to find out what emoji was that, because I think everyone will be very curious about this. I am.
They wanted to rebuild Chatter because they were missing emojis.
Exactly. Yeah, it was the feature. It was not missing one emoji, but it was missing a few emojis.
A few emojis. Okay, fine.
It's the same thing.
And did they end up doing?
No, because it's rebuilding Chatter. It doesn't make any sense. It's massive, and even some functionalities like tagging somebody, that's quite hard unless you use a library to help you. But it's not easy at all. It doesn't make any sense. But I think sometimes some customers bring ideas from other apps that they saw how it was working, and they wanted to mimic that, and sometimes it's not going to be exactly in that way. But with customer-facing thing like community, they want to have it like super close to what they want.
You need to educate the client on the possibilities, they are paying for a platform as a service, but also software as a service. So if you end up using Salesforce licensing, you just use custom things, you're missing out on the out-of-the-box capabilities, functionalities. And if the moment you start using custom objects for what a standard object could provide you might eventually in the future want to include an add-on that is built on top of one of the standard objects, and you simply need to migrate everything again because at some moment somebody made the decision to not use that standard object. So it's kind of in a way important to educate as much as possible, not trying to impose your vision or your decisions, but to teach in the best interest of both parties that at the end you need to understand some functionalities there for a reason. You're paying for that, and maybe you could adapt to that capability rather than building it all to be completely customized and tailored to the business needs.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of a fun challenge to have because it's because the platform is too powerful. It's like in another system you might not have this dilemma because you cannot do it. No, but here since Salesforce is not a CRM but is a platform to develop applications, essentially you can do whatever you want within the limits. But this means that we as architects will have these challenges, no? It's like, hey, people want this capability, but if we do it in a more standard way, maybe we don't have the full capability and so on. So how do we convince the clients that is the right way to go? What Kevin was saying makes total sense, and it boils down to trust that we were saying before. No, if you have built the trust, all the team has built the trust, then all these conversations are easier. But one tool, a specific architectural tool that we use many times, is proof of concept and comparison tables. So we put the different solutions we describe them. If there is enough time and budget, always consider you can do a small or not so small proof of concept, depending also on the decision. If it's a bit more important or less important, you would want the more important. Of course, you will want to do a more thorough proof of concept, and you will build a comparison table with the pros and cons of each option. Or typically, you can do pros and cons, or you can do the different features that you want to build. No? It's like if you want to build something that has like 10 features, this option covers 7, this option covers 6, but then in this option is standard, this option is custom. And you will guide your clients and say, look, if we go in, we have built this comparison table. This is what it's being covered. These are the pros and cons. This is our recommendation. We think that we should go this way. And then sometimes the final choice is there. They are the client. But as it is your obligation to provide this guidance. No? And I would say 90% of the time, because of you've built this trust, because of all this, they will go in your direction. 10% of the time, sometimes they will go on the other direction, and then later you might be able to say I told you so, which is not a happy moment at all. It's not a happy moment at all because you have to typically then redo things. But it is our responsibility to guide them, and the best way sometimes to do it is with this proof of concept and having this kind of discussions.
Where you just go with the emojis. And that's it.
If they say that they want to reveal chatter, you reveal chatter.
You do the emojis. Good. Refactoring. Let's talk a little bit about refactoring because that's one of the hardest sell. How would you sell refactoring to your clients?
I think with that one, sometimes it's even challenging when that's the only thing that you're selling, right? Because there's different scenarios. One is like, okay, we're doing new features, and at the same time, we're doing some refactoring because it's needed. If you're only selling refactor, it's a little bit tough because refactor takes time. And it takes time for the customer, the client too, because they have to test it, do UAT again, check that everything's working as it was working before. There's nothing new. So in order for them to understand the value, again, it's what Pere and Kevin said, you need trust before, so they know that what you're doing is going to be good for them. And try to, let's say, translate these technical needs into something that's more tangible for them. And they will listen, because everything's for the future in this case. When you're refactoring, it's like, right now, you might not see the issue, but then this is not a scalable org. It's hard to maintain. There's going to be a lot of issues. There are issues right now that are happening because of that. And then if you want to keep adding new stuff, it's going to be challenging and hard.
Yeah. In this scenario, sometimes the limits are your friend, because they provide you a tangible way of saying, well, if we don't do this, here come the limits, and they will they will impact your functionality. So it's always, as you were saying, try to see if we're losing scalability, performance is low. If we do this, it will improve a little bit. Try to bring the functional value there. But I think I've never been able to solve the only refactors.
With performance, you have a good excuse because they can see, okay, see, now it's working faster. But when it's only like really bad quality code that they don't see it, and you have to modify that, that's a hard sell.
Because what are the signs that an org needs refactoring?
When you constantly, for every new feature you're trying to build, it takes way more testing efforts to deliver, and there's a cost that is invisible there. But especially when you have worked in several features implementations with your client, generally the closest people, the team you interface the most with, they generally see that if every new automation you build or enhancement you attempt, you face that there is an existing maybe a process builder, a workflow, a validation rule that nobody understands, a process builder, an approval process that triggers suddenly when there is this lack of knowledge of the processes. It's because most likely nobody has maintained them properly. They are not part of the current vision or the current understanding of what are the processes the business is trying to follow and automate in the platform. And that's a good moment to, once you have a good reverse engineering and documentation, to kind of sell this as this could potentially become a project to just refactor. You define the scope, no? You could say, let's address all these legacy workflows and process builders and move them into flows, or maybe you have lots of flows. Let's try to simplify the automations. Let's try to just clean up unused fields because you're close to the 500 limits per object. These kind of situations when you have documented them and the client sees the cost, because there's a cost in every new enhancement or development. It would take much less time to deliver value if you had addressed this technical debt. Once they have that understanding, you teach them, they trust you, and you have a good documentation to define a clear scope, you could potentially there introduce a project to address that piece of the technical debt. And then, as Kisha was saying, like every time you build something new and a technical debt is blocking you, that's a good chance to, if it doesn't add much effort to the enhancement or development, to introduce a refactor there, a small refactor.
Let me just say that this to me is the most difficult refactor to detect. Because maybe the development team sees it, but the management, the ones that are using the org, they don't see that the development is taking a long time. So I fully agree, totally agree, but I think it's the most tricky to detect. I think that there are maybe two other cases that you can see that you have a problem you need to refactor. One is the limits we've talked about. If you're hitting limits, that it will force you to do it because suddenly the application is stop working. But one other sign that you might need a refactor is that you are changing something in the application and something completely unrelated breaks. You are changing accounts and quotes break. It's like, why? And
that's more visible for me as well when I enter and I'm creating a new opportunity or something, right?
That at every new release, every new deployment to production is breaking something. No? It's like, this should trigger alarm bells and say something is happening here. That cannot be that every time that we deploy something else is breaking. And to me, this is one also way that you can sell the refactor and say, look, we this because we have not done our technical debt, because it has been accumulated. We know that everybody should dedicate 20% of the time to technical debt. Let's say it's not usual. It's very difficult on a consultancy to sell this, but when you end up with a customer that has had these kind of issues, it's much more easier to make them understand that, hey, if you don't do these actions, then you will get on the situation that you had before, and then make you call Nuvolar to come help you with these things, no?
So as a regular user, if I see something being very slow, or if I create a new opportunity and it doesn't work as I want it, I can call Nuvolar to fix it, correct?
Yeah.
We'll
Absolutely.
check and we will refactor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. How do you balance between technical debt and new features when it comes to an org? Would you do 50-50, or would you focus on one or the other?
As I said before, the industry standard, if you will, it's at least a minimum of 20% of time dedicated to technical debt. This is much more easy to do if you own your own product. If you are a software development company that is developing your own product, you understand the pain that you will be in if you don't do this. But when when you are asking a third party as a consultant to come on in, you want features. You don't want technical debt, no? So it's very tricky. It goes back again to trust. If you have you have the right partner that you have developed this trust in them, if we come and tell you, hey, we really need to dedicate some time to this, because we've been adding a lot of features and we need to do technical debt, then it's a bit more easy. But in terms of percentages, for sure, I would say 20% is the industry standard, and that applies to not only code. It means also for flows or any kind of low code, no code process or data model. All of these kind of exercises you used are part of the technical debt also.
And that will be addressing technical debt. But the other thing is not generating more technical debt. And sometimes it's this thing that urgency is kind of the best friend of technical debt. And it happens sometimes that things need to be done for yesterday. And those are the moments usually when technical debt gets added. And usually in those kind of environments where everything is super urgent, there's never a moment to address technical debt. And there's so many moments to generate more technical debt. So that's something that the company should have best practices apply already, and standards that are shared throughout the entire company. So we make sure that we don't add any technical debt when we're developing.
And here it's where we could become more technical, but we should not. But we could talk about design patterns, architecture review boards, code reviews, peer reviews, even if it's for flows or declarative automations. That's how you address and prevent technical debt from appearing in the first place. And you have a healthy org that can scale and perform at the standards of an enterprise software.
Yeah.
And this we do well. This is something that we are kind of experts in, and we've applied it internally to our own Salesforce product. And because we are a software development company and we have all of these software development guidelines, processes, we kind of naturally translated it into the Salesforce world. And it's something that for us came out of the box. It's our standard, if you will. No, so whereas for a company that uses Salesforce and they have maybe their own Salesforce admins or so on, it is not natural to do all of these kind of things, and it is a bit more easy for them to generate technical debt. So it's always good to have somebody like Nuvolar that can come and put these processes, these guidelines in place, this center of excellence, that maybe later you can continue on your own, but at least you contain this technical debt generation. You will always generate a little bit, but as much as you can, you need to contain it through best practices. One small trick that we like to do is the Boy Scout rules. It's a small thing, but this small thing can be very powerful if everybody does it. Boy Scout rule is kind of the translation into code or configuration, if you will, that you should always leave your org or your code a little bit better than you find it. It's like in the forest, no? You should always leave the forest a little bit better than you find it. So this is something we try to do as much as possible. And it helps with the technical debt, or when you don't have this time to refactor, no? These are small things that you can do. This trigger, I don't know why somebody didn't create it in the trigger framework. Let's add it now that I have to do a new functionality here. Or I don't know why nobody used this standard functionality. Let's try to use this one. So these little things that I call the Boy Scout rule, if all the team has this mindset, and this is something we are very strong in, help kind of mitigate technical debt, even when the win is against you, even when I don't have the client doesn't have time and so on. So I think it's something that can be very powerful, and anybody can do, even if you have a situation where your client says, no, sorry, no time for this, we need to deliver features. You can still apply the Boy Scout rule, and it will help a little bit in the technical debt.
It's a really good one. Yeah, thank you.
Also, one important consideration about dedicating, investing in refactoring and addressing technical debt is that you might not need to refactor or handle or generate technical debt because of an introduction from your development team or an outsourced development team, but because Salesforce evolves and improves and adds releases that might deprecate old versions of API components, or might introduce new functionality that is now native, but you build it with a custom solution. And so now your solution is performing worse than the native one, and that's no longer necessary. And you might want it to migrate it to the native solution.
A Visual Force page today,
technologies that are dated.
Process Builder at the time were perfectly fine. Now, technical debt.
There's technical debt that is organic. Not every technical debt is just bad quality practices that we buy. It's just that as just time goes by, there's better practices, better frameworks to use, and better tools.
Okay, just to wrap it up, what is your favorite part of being a Salesforce architect, Kevin?
That I learn something new every day. That I kind of learn not just by the challenges that I face, but because in teaching, which now I have the chance to teach not just my team, but the client, and in teaching, like, it forces you to adopt a vocabulary and to document things in a way that you put your ideas and thoughts into a format that is easier, not just to communicate what's your design and what's your thought to other people, but to iterate over my own designs. And, I learn faster combining all these techniques and tools. And so, I love that I can learn something new every day, and technical and not technical. And I learn new soft skills, new vocabulary, new business concepts every day.
So for me, it's not specifically architect, or it's sometimes kind of an engineering thing. So what being an architect has taught me is there is no problem that I cannot face. And this applies now to it's like, no matter the complexity that they bring to the table, we'll break it down, we'll analyze it, we'll look at the different tools in our toolbox, and we'll build the solution. We'll have to make trade-offs here, trade-offs there, but we will make it happen. And we've managed to do very, very complicated things in our years as a consultancy in Nuvolar, but also in our own software product, Nuvotalks. It's really, really awesome things that we've managed to do. That at the beginning, I was like, it's impossible. We're not going to be able to make this happen. And we did it. And I kind of apply this philosophy to my life. Some complicated situation, something that I don't think I can overcome will come. Is like architect hat, a superpower. And the superpower is very simple. It's an engineering approach. You just break down the problem. If you cannot solve it, you break it down more. If you cannot solve it, you break it down more until you are able to use the tools that you have at hand to start with this little part, and suddenly a few months later, you will have a working solution. So I really, this kind of solutioning is something that I really enjoy.
Yuki,
I think I like the non-technical part of also being an architect. This idea that you have to translate really hardcore technical stuff to people that is not technical. And you're kind of the middleware sometimes between the technical side and the stakeholder, the customer, or even some consultants, developers that are working on that. I really like trying to understand how can I explain that to this person so they can understand the best way possible. And also I like the challenge. Sometimes it's a blessing or at the same time a curse. Estimations, right? It's something that is you have to do without exactly knowing, whereas something that you're super abstract into this creative challenge of, okay, you have some tools, you have some previous experience on that, but still you're basically trying to look in the future and try to guess what it's going to be. Of course, you have a framework that basically as a background, but you are in the middle of sometimes two different expectations, right? I hope it could take the least it can take to build this, but at the same time, you need to be sure that you have enough time for the team to build it. So this thought war, and you're the rope. Beforehand, before even knowing, and the longer the project, the most uncertain it is to estimate. So it's kind of like a tough place to be in, but at the same time, I don't know, that challenge kind of like sparks some nerve in me. It's quite good.
You open a Pandora box. Estimations. We don't talk about it, but we can do another episode on estimation.
We could do, definitely, because being even a Salesforce consultant, as I was myself, it was always very difficult to estimate. How do you do it when it comes to a very complex org? I'm always wondering when I'm seeing the results when you provide it to a client, and where does this come from? How do you learn it to estimate? How do you learn to estimate?
Hey, you make everything up, then you pass it to Kevin to do, and that's it.
So it's a teamwork.
It's a teamwork. Teamwork.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, the longer the project, the less certain or precise the estimations are going to be, right? And also, if you're involved in different systems, different teams, the thing is, sometimes estimations is not only, okay, we have to implement this, and this team is going to do it. You have teams playing together. And sometimes you don't even know how accessible or reachable the other team will be. So it started becoming not only a technical issue, but more like a project management challenge. And that's when it gets complicated. And of course, there's flexibility, especially for longer projects, to understand, okay, there might be a gap that you don't know how much it's going to take. You have to do some POCs to try to understand, okay, is this possible? Because that's the worst thing. It's just in the middle of the game knowing, oh, actually, this cannot be done, or it has to be done such a different way that it just changed the whole nature of the project. But it's definitely a challenge. And this is a starting, or almost a first phase of the project.
Yeah. So what we learned today, being a Salesforce architect, you have to wear many hats. You have to be a team worker. You have to have very good communication skills. You have to be a project manager. You have to be a consultant, sometimes a developer. You have to do estimations, think of technical depth. What else?
Well, you need all of the foundational knowledge of the platform. So it's you have to be somebody that has taken the hard tasks. I'm sorry to say, you have to taken the hard tasks. You have done your studying, taken the difficult certifications. I like what Guille was saying at the very beginning, like you want to be looking under the hood, no? It's like not only say, I fix this and it works. Okay, but why does it work? Let's understand what is going on here, no? If you have this mindset, you are already in the path.
It's more a mindset, I think, being an architect, like it's you just naturally evolve to an architect when you start asking questions like, how can I do this better? And you are curious enough and a good learner. You have to be fast and a good learner because technology changes very fast. Everything changes very fast, and you need to be up to date to, use the latest functionality or technologies and incorporate them into your solution. Obviously, nobody is an AI, and you might miss something, but you can do the best possible if you just read a lot and investigate, and don't assume that what you know today it's enough. Like there might be something new you're missing, and then you're always trying to do it better the next time.
So being a Salesforce architect is challenging but a rewarding work.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was.
It was a pleasure.
Today's episode was definitely interesting, and we learned a lot about what it takes to become a good Salesforce architect. You need to be good at teamwork. You need to be good at documentation, design patterns. You need to understand the limits of the Salesforce org, and a lot more. In our next episode, we will be bringing something very exciting to the table. We will be talking about Salesforce, AI, and what Salesforce can do with AI. Stay tuned.